if y'all have studied this book, you know that it was written by Jesus' half-brother. I don't do the half-brother thing. That's his brother.
Okay.
I'm not a half-brother. I'm not a half-sibling kind of. I've got a half-brother. I don't do the half-brother thing. It's all or nothing. It's all or nothing kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
Just like everything else with God, it's all or nothing. So I'll start off with this. My husband and I and our kids, we have 2 dogs. One is named Ellie and one is named Mac. Ellie is a chocolate lab. Mac is an American Bulldog Mastiff mix. Ellie is not the brightest crayon in the box.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever she was quite a bit younger, we would always let them in the house, in and out, and it was before we had Russell, and so it made it easy to play with them and love on them, and now we kind of can't do that. Russell, they're big, they would not intentionally, knock them down or hurt any of them, and that would just hurt my feelings. But nonetheless, they were in the house, and Ellie started feeling really, really bad. She laid down on the floor in front of the couch, and she would not get up. And anytime you tried to move her, the most gut-wrenching, heart-wrenching squeal would come from her just from pain. And she's a dog. She can't tell me what's wrong. She can't tell me I'm hurting, don't do this. All she can do is give me some sort of signal saying, look, leave me alone. So it's probably 10:30, 11 o'clock at night already whenever this happens on a weeknight. We've got work in the morning. My daughter is in the bed. So Chris's mom, she comes over and she watches Victoria for us. And we take Ellie to the emergency vet in Lovejoy. And they don't know what's wrong. They give her tests, they do a couple things, and they say, okay, we need to do some sort of exploratory surgery. It's going to be this much. We've got to give her this. And I was like, holy moly, that's going to bankrupt us in a sense, because who prepares for, $1,000, $2,000 vet bill and whenever. So I told him, I said, just give her the pain medication, let me get her home. And then first thing in the morning, it was already 5 o'clock in the morning anyway, I'll just take her to her normal vet that has all of her background information and that I trust. Not that I don't trust y'all, but that I trust. And we'll go from there. So we get her to the vet. She's still hurting. She's kind of lethargic from all the stuff going on. And she's still squealing from pain. And we don't know what's wrong with her. So we take her to the vet. She has exploratory surgery. They don't find anything. They put a cone on her, stitch her up, and she's hurting probably just as much, if not more, than before. Mm-hmm. So she pretty quickly comes out of it. But during that time, she had no idea what was going on. She didn't know why these 2 people that loved her dearly took her to this place and made her go through all these things. And what we experience is similar. What we face in life is very similar. We don't expect things to happen. We don't expect trials and tribulations and hurt, death. We don't expect any of these things to come to us. Mm-hmm. And it happened the same way for her. All we can do is go with it. Mm-hmm. It just is what it is. We don't know. We can't see past what is directly in front of us. We can't feel past the emotional state that we're in at the moment. We can't see what God is doing, what sort of strings He is pulling in people's lives that's going to ultimately affect us. Mm-hmm. Even if we tried to explain it, we couldn't. We can't comprehend the magnitude of what He's doing, but we just have to trust that our God is at work and that He has a purpose for the way that He's doing things. And that's what Ellie had to do. She had to trust that in the state that she was in and the pain she was in, that we were doing what was best for her. And we all have to do that. And the gap between us and God is so much greater than the gap between us in the room. You know, we just cannot in any way comprehend his work. And ultimately, that's kind of what James helps us through, and he helps teach us to deal with, is how to handle these gaps, how to handle the unknown, and how to grow from it, and how work comes from faith, and how the things that we do show people the love that we have for God. So, the book of James, I guess we'll start with verse 1. Like I said, James, it's the brother of Jesus. It's said that this book was written in AD 40, so it was an early book. It is in the New Testament. So it's basically, you know, the nuts and bolts in the New Testament of everything that was kind of put together in the Old Testament with all the rules and laws. He was one of the most important leaders of the Jewish believers. This book is written like a letter, because he was talking to the Jewish believers from a distance. He wasn't right there with them, so he had to just introduce himself the same as he does to us. So it says, James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes scattered among the nations. The 12 tribes being Jewish believers among the nations. Usually the Roman Empire is who he was talking to. But it says on here who James is. Not only is he the brother of Jesus, but he is a servant of God. And I think that that's something that a lot of people that go over this book bring attention to, is that he was a servant. He did God's work. But, you know, what does it mean for us now to be that servant of God? What does it mean for us in a world where it's so easy to just say, no, I won't do this Bible study? What does it mean for us to say, okay, God, I will do what you're telling me to, but this is what I've got to get out of it? That's not what we can do. We can't do that. We have to say, okay, God, whatever it is, I suppose I'll do it, no matter how much it causes me to stress. And we're not supposed to do that either, but yet it's so easy to do that. So it means to let God's will truly be done, and to not take any of his plans in our own hands, to serve without expectation. We'll keep going. So it says, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. I don't know about y'all, but whenever I face trial, my first instinct is to run. And to make it easy.
Yeah.
But it starts off with the word consider. What do you know about consider? Consider is a thinking emotion. Consider is not a feeling term. It's something that you have to really conjure over. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, pure joy whenever you face trials of many kinds. So the pure joy part, knowing that consider is not an emotional term, it's a thinking term. That means that your mind has to be in the right place. So you have to have that positive outlook on whatever it is that he's facing you with. You have to deliberately adopt positivity into your life. it's not easy,
Mm-hmm.
because the easiest part about considering anything is that there are two options. There's a good one and a bad one. So you have to make yourself stop and recognize that the things that God has planned for us are good things. That no matter what it is we're facing, they're good things. So pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever, not if, but when
Mm-hmm.
you face trials of any kind. We're supposed to see this whole thing from God's perspective. We're supposed to say, okay, God, you've got a plan much greater than anything I can imagine. I'm going to be your servant. I'm going to consider the fact that you can make this into something positive for my life, and we'll get through this together, because that's his promise. And whenever you're walking through life, things happen. People pass. A dog gets sick. Your best friend says that they don't want to be your friend anymore because your religion and their thoughts don't match up. You know, there's so many things that hit us and face us that we can't, it's very easy to consider that negativity and to say, okay, I don't care anymore, I'll just do whatever I want to do. But we can't. It's whenever the most unexpected things happen that we grow the most. We hear that so often. And it's not different in James. But a question I have for y'all is, why, right now, with as far as we've gone into 2 verses, why do you think that you should feel pure joy when you're faced with these things? Why?
I think it's just, because of the next part that it says it produces perseverance. But I was actually listening to a podcast earlier today, and it was a mom talking to an older mom, like a mom whose children were grown, and she said that she had raised 6 kids on the mission field, and the interviewer, the podcaster, was kind of asking what was that like and things like that, and all of her kids are pretty much missionaries, or they're really strong in their faith and they're confident. And she was saying how did you get to that place? And one of the things she was talking about was having to really trust God with them, and to let them take risks. And she was saying that she wanted to shield them from everything that happened to them, but then there was no matter how much she wanted that, and no matter how much she prayed, each of her children had their own struggles and trials they had to go through, and how that is part of their story, and that's part of the reason that they can minister to others. Mm-hmm. And she was talking about one particular daughter who had been through something pretty traumatic, and as a mom, she just didn't even really want to face the fact that her daughter had experienced that, but her daughter has said to her over and over again, God has used it, he's healed it, he's I had to, that's part of my story, and it's part of the way that I minister to others. And so just realizing that when we are walking with God, he can use anything that we go through. I think it's hard as a parent to want your child to go through trials, but I know that I've been through trials and that they made me who I am, and I wouldn't wish them away. And I think most people would say that for themselves after the fact, maybe not in the midst of it, but after the fact,
Well, the hardest thing I think is watching your children, especially that we've been through with the youngest, and that is hard. But I always tell everybody, I never realized, I always felt a peace. We didn't know whether he was going to live or die, but I just always felt a peace, and I have no idea. I didn't know where it was coming from, you know what I mean, until years later, well, why does he have to be like this? But, anybody that meets him, you know what I mean, he is a joy, and, that's part of his story.
Yeah. What's his name?
Christopher.
Christopher, I know. It's Christopher and John?
Yeah, and then we have Richie.
Okay,
And then,
yeah.
with Richie, little Richie too, with his stuff, so I feel that way too. And then, what we went through, because I've seen spouses, when growing up, I used to babysit for 3 boys. and one of their boys wound up getting cancer, and he wound up passing away. And I saw what it did to the marriage, and I was only 13, but I could see how it just, they were so disconnected, so, you know what I mean? And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm thinking to myself at 13 years old, why aren't they supporting each other? Why, you know what I mean? And what am I to know at 13? But then, like, when Richie and I went through it, like, it brought us together a lot, and, you know, it made our marriage stronger, it made our family unit, you know, I mean, we lived at the Ronald McDonald house for six months.
Mm-hmm.
That was our house. That was where we lived, where we raised our family. You know, and that's why I always say, a house doesn't make a home. It's the people in it.
Yeah, and that's crazy that something that you saw when you were 13 like helped you
Right.
to like realize that you needed to like pull close to your husband instead of pulling far.
Right. Like,
because I've read some statistics too that like whenever there's like any kind of trauma, that's like a real, like that's a good reason for divorce.
Right,
Like whenever
yes.
there's an issue.
Well, you know, when Richie was diagnosed with type 1, you know, that was the first thing that we went through. And, you know, the nurses, they were telling us that, like, some parents just leave the kids, you know, I mean, and then, you know, then the husband and wife get divorced because whoever can't handle it, or, you know what I mean? And I'm like, that does not make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You would think you'd want to, you know, but some people just can't handle. And, you know, when Crystal was in the hospital, that's all I heard. It's in God's time. You can't handle, you know, God's not going to give you anything more than you can handle. And, you know, at some points I was like, I don't want to listen to this. I'm like, how much does he think I can handle? You know?
Yeah.
But, you know.
I don't necessarily agree with that.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I would be upset at times, but then, like, okay.
Yeah.
You know, but then in the long run, but it did help other, you know, like other families that had come in after. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
your story, it does make a difference. And that's why, like, even with what we're going through now with little Richie, you know, they're like, oh, you're going through something. I'm like, you know what? Another trial, and then we'll have another story towards it. You know what I mean? And that's how I look at it, because you have to be positive, because you can really be down and hate God every day for what you're going through. But, you know, but how do you learn from making mistakes, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of goes back to, you know, something that happened whenever you were 13 kind of developed later on in your life, and how God uses things, everything,
Yep.
in His time.
Yep.
You know, it all comes back to being His time. I was telling my husband, I was like, this isn't something I want to do, doing a Bible study. This, you know, I've kind of tried to avoid it, but I feel like there's, you know, I'm dead weight here, and I don't know if maybe this is what it's supposed to be or not, but, you know, it's in His time.
Mm-hmm.
That weight will be lifted. You were brought to everything you've been brought to, you know, in His time. And every heartbreak, every tear we shed, every pinch of pain that we feel, it's because He's got a plan for that. And it's going to be His will and not ours. And when you face trials of many kinds, He doesn't tell you what it's going to be. He doesn't tell you how it's going to be. He doesn't tell you who it's going to come from, whether it's your mom and dad, your brother, your sister. He doesn't tell you if it's going to come from your kids, your husband, or, you know, He doesn't tell you. So you have no option but to be faithful and do whatever it is He's calling you to do. So let's keep going. It says, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. So what is your definition of perseverance?
Keep going.
Pushing through.
I saw something that said D. Edmund Hebert, I guess that's how you pronounce it, explains it by saying that it presents the picture of being under a heavy load and resolutely staying there instead of trying to escape. So that's the use of the word perseverance in this context. But I'm not the one to just sit there and let it happen. I'm the type to run. I'm the type to get out of the situation. I'm the type to try and fix the situation. So if you're the kind of person like I am, that's gonna run, that's gonna hide in a closet, that's gonna hide under the table, that's gonna, pull the covers over my head, that's gonna drive as far as I can, where does that say that we're focused? If we're not gonna stand there and persevere, where are we focused? Well, that tells me that I'm not focused on the one that's going. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Romans 8:28. If I'm not looking and focused on God, and these things come and hit me, I'm not going to recognize that it is for the good of his kingdom, and I'm gonna run. Fight or flight, I'm going to fly. I'm not gonna fight.
I really like that definition. Can you read it again?
It says, it presents the picture of being under a heavy load and resolutely staying there instead of trying to escape.
That kind of hit me because I feel like when I'm upset about something, like I want to escape and not necessarily run away, but I think about like the ways that I do escape. Like either like I escape in like a novel or I take a nap because I just don't want to deal with it. And like how like I will take a nap instead of like dealing with my emotions, and I really could just like spend some time with God and I'd feel better. But so often I don't do that. So often I just like want to escape from the feeling.
I'll clean. If I never clean again, I'll clean. Whenever I have it going on, I'll clean. So I understand.
Like you're escaping into that.
Yeah. Or Chris will look at me and he'll say, "What's wrong?" And I'll be like, "Nothing." I won't even go do anything sometimes. Sometimes I just do it in my head. And I think that our mind is the biggest closet that we have to hide in. And, whether it is a novel, whether it is cleaning, whether it is doing something with your kids, whatever it is that's taking your mind off of that and off of your focus, that's my closet, and that's the first place I'm going. Because me dealing with it, you can forget it. So it's being under a heavy load and resolutely staying there instead of trying to escape. So sometimes our focus towards God even is asking him to take the load off or take the pain away. But ultimately, that's not what James is saying. Your faith produces perseverance. So rather than saying, "God, please just take it away. God, why? Why are you putting me through this? God, why am I having to deal with this?" We're supposed to say, God, what is this for? God, where are you taking me? God, what do I need to do to get there to make this right so that your kingdom can be glorified? And I think that that's probably the hardest thing about perseverance that there is saying it's not about me. It's not about taking away my anguish or my pain, my hurt, or my thought processes. It's about saying, God, I'm not focusing on my kids. I'm not focusing on my husband, my job, my house, the shambles it may or may not be in. I'm going to focus on you. I'm going to stop. I'm going to be in your word. I'm going to learn your character so that I can see how you're working in your time. Because I need all of the artillery that I can get so that whenever your time is here, I can recognize it. So it says, let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Mature and complete. What do y'all think of that?
I think I can be really immature sometimes in my thoughts towards God. like I think that sometimes like when I'm throwing a curveball or something, and and it can be something like big or small, like my kid's pitching fits at Target, like something like that. Like I can just go from like being like a mature adult to being like, gosh, and just like being really immature in my thoughts, maybe not outwardly, but in my thoughts. And I think sometimes like if I don't know, like if I just like focus my attention on like, okay, well, like if I saw it through, instead of just getting mad, but like saw it through, then maybe I would become more mature over time.
You and I have a lot in common. So what about you? What do you think? Mature and complete?
Well, I think, having the little getting mad at, I think like thinking it through, I think. You know what I mean? I don't give always the first initial, and I think that's a worldly thing, is getting mad, because it's, we live in such a negative, you know what I mean? Everybody wants to be negative first,
right,
instead of looking at the positive. You know what I mean? But like I try to, always look at the positive as much as I can. You know what I mean? Because I've seen what what can be done. You know what I mean? In all lives, in my children's lives, and it's amazing. But it's like getting through all that. You know what I mean? And like you said, God prepares us. He really does. It's just, I look back on my life and I see it's amazing how much, you know what I mean? Like I don't think we'd be able to go through what we went through if we didn't go through all that. You know what I mean? And He does prepare us for sure.
So it's a process.
Yes.
yeah,
It's not something that happens instantly. It's not
No.
something that you just know. It says, let perseverance finish, which means it's had to go through all these things. You had to go through kids pitching a fit, kids not being in perfect tip-top health at all times. You've had to go through all these things so that you can become mature, so that whenever you look at these situations, you can say, okay, we've got this. This is how we get through this. And God, this is how you're going to be glorified. So that whenever we're hit with something else, something that our neighbor, love thy neighbor, whenever they're going through it, you can say, hey, look, this is what's going to happen. This is where you're going to be emotionally. But remember, this is where you're going to come out.
yeah. I like that, not lacking anything. That's such a good promise. And like, in this particular season, I've just been like moving, because we started over 2 years ago. Like 2 years ago, we were starting over in a different place.
Oh, wow.
And now we're starting again. And I guess for me, it's been a challenge just because I'm also a young mom, and I also like became a mom during this period of time, and like I had my own issues with that. Like I was really super sick when I was pregnant with Amelia, and I mean everything was healthy. It was just like I was constantly just sick as a dog, and I constantly had a migraine headache that was like so intense I couldn't do anything about it, and that was like the whole 9 months. So I had been through that. Yeah, so I had been through that, and then like right after, or like moving in the midst of that, and then like not even 2 yet, and we moved again, and like we lived in our house for 16 months. So like we unpacked everything and then packed it right back up, and so sometimes I just like I can be kind of immature and be like I'm already trying to like get a handle on being a mom. Like can't I just like have some peace or something?
Have a breath.
Yeah, but
That's the fun way to learn.
yeah, but I also know, like I know beyond a shadow of doubt that like this is where like God has placed us, and like that we're going, like we went through that for a reason. I'm starting to feel a lot better because like I only have like 4 more back boxes to unpack, but just like knowing like and like
in the meantime, she's picturing the box and okay, this needs to
yeah, yes. But my mom is coming to help me this weekend, so I'll be good after this weekend. But
Mom always makes it feel better.
yeah, she does. But anyway, just like I don't know, this is hitting me really hard today because I feel like I haven't been mature throughout the whole thing. Like I've tried to be. I've done the best I could, but maybe I haven't gone to God as much as I could have. I've just been more like kind of trying to suck it up in my own strength, you know? And when I look at this, I'm like, well, this is like really clear about what we should do. Because like, I hate to get ahead of us, but it says, like, if you lack wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously. Like, and it makes me feel like he might be convicting me right now, right here, but he's also going to do it generously. Like, he's going to give wisdom, and he's like, you know, and he has this whole time. Like, I feel like God pursues me and pursues me and pursues me, even when I'm like not looking, or not like trying to be pursued.
You
like,
can forget it.
Yeah. Because like one thing that happened was like when we found out we were leaving, I was on a youth retreat with the youth that I was leading at the time, and like all the sermons applied to like it basically could have just been just about me moving to a different place that I wasn't expecting to have moved yet. You know, like it was like God was like, this is what you're supposed to do, this is what you're supposed to do, this is what you're supposed to do, and I was like, oh my gosh, or God, but
Yeah.
But it was like all about like seasons and like how different seasons are for different things, like growth or like planting seeds and, you know, all kinds of things. And it was just like every single thing that was said was like, this is me in my situation. And I knew then, like, that we were supposed to come here, and that like I was, you know, gonna be okay once I unpacked all the boxes once again. Like it was gonna settle down and be all right. But like he's just like pursued me over and over again. Even when I haven't like looked at him, he's been generous and like shown me like that he is with me. You know.
I don't know how you do that.
But then sometimes you don't know he's doing that. Like I said, with with me, I just felt that peace. So like he pursues you when you don't even know it.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know, I grew up Catholic, and when I was like 7, my senior year in high school, my aunt was she was a Christian, and she went to a Christian church, and my family was like, that was bad. And I went to church with her, and and we were at some concert or whatever, and then I accepted Christ, and and then it just, but that was like just my little beginning, you know what I mean? And then from then for years I kept saying, I need to go to a different church, and it took this long, I'm gonna be 43, and we've been here almost 3.5 years at this church, and it's like, okay, I can, you know what I mean? I'm like, oh, the teaching from the Bible, oh, this is how it's supposed to be. So he does pursue us without, and not even knowing, or a friend will just come and, just somebody will tell you something. I mean, I've had people stop me in the street. I was leaving the water, paying the water bill, and this woman came up to me, and she just said everything, it was just, I was hysterical crying, because I was like, oh my gosh, how, and I'm like, I know he sent her there, and but if she didn't obey, you know what I mean, like, that was a perfect example of, if we don't obey, somebody else's blessing is gonna, someone may miss the blessing. So I was so thankful that she did, because that meant, that was, maybe I'm saying, well, how do I know if you're here? You know what I mean? Like, I can't remember what it was, because it was a few years ago, but
yeah, that's really
it is.
And so that's what James tells us. He says that if we do persevere, if we do take that road and we choose to persevere, that it makes us mature and complete, that we can better get to know our own character and who we are by seeing how we react under pressure, how we react during these trials. What are we going to do? And it says, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault. I think the key to that is not just lacks wisdom, you should ask and he will give generously, but he gives generously to all without finding fault. I don't think that is accidental, that he says without finding fault. Because our God is a God of forgiveness, that as long as we choose to be obedient to him and to serve him, to be what James is, that servant, to have that servant mentality, that he does not find fault in us by our shortcomings. He says, if you ask, I'll give it. But then he goes on to say, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt. Because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. He will give to you. He will give to us. And we can learn who we are and how we're going to react. But we cannot doubt who we are in Him, who He is in us, and the world that He created. The world, the same hands that created us, that navigates our day, that grows the grass, is the same hand that parted the Red Sea. It's the same hand that created the Garden of Eden. It's the same hand that created Adam and Eve, that has done all these things. And as long as we do not doubt the fact that He sent His Son to die for us, if we don't doubt that, then we get it. We get the wisdom that He's giving us because we can recognize it. We can recognize that He's saying, you're going to hurt. It's not going to be easy. I'm going to call you to do things that you never thought you were capable of, that you probably didn't even know that somebody else was capable of, but you're going to do them because you love me, and I know that you love me, and I'm going to give this to you. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all that they do. So, have you ever had somebody say one thing and do another?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever been guilty of it? I have.
It's harder for me to see, but probably yes.
I am guilty all the time of not doing exactly what I say that I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are times where I'll do most of it, but I just won't want to do that last little bit and finish it, and I won't do it. That's something that I've been faced with recently is, well, do you really do what you say you're going to do? Well, you know what? If I haven't, then I guess I need to. Because that's what God is telling me to do right here. He is convicting me, saying, look, if you're going to ask for this, don't doubt it. You're going to have to follow through. Don't be two-faced. Don't have a church face. Have on your real face all the time. And that's one of the things about this young adult ministry that I want to hit on, is that it's not about the church face. It's not about the things that people see. It's about the things that are going on in our hearts and our minds. And whenever you ask somebody, how are you doing? Mean it. Whenever I ask somebody, well, how are you doing? I don't want to hear, because I've trained myself to really want to know and to be able to help if I can. If I can't, okay, it's not meant for me. And that's something that took me a long time to learn. But if I know someone that could help, maybe that'll benefit you. But to love your neighbor, and that is the hardest thing that I go through. That is one of the biggest things that I want to run from, is loving my neighbor, because it's so easy to get wrapped up in my world and say, okay, I'm doing my worship time, I'm doing my Bible study, I'm doing this for me, I'm doing this for my family, but what about the community? And I lose sight of that. And whenever you start saying community, my first instinct is to hide in the closet.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have felt as though I've gotten burned whenever I've tried to say God loves you, and I've approached it incorrectly, and I'm still trying to learn that. And maybe I didn't get burned. Maybe it's just a matter of going back and saying, God, okay, this is what happened. How do I help? How do I help your kingdom? How do I help your kingdom to grow by one? Because it only takes one. And so with that being said, what do you do? What do you do whenever you feel like you've been burned? Whenever you feel like, okay, this world is awful. I don't want anything to do with it. I'm going to go in my closet with my family, raise them, and I'm good. But what if that's not what God has called us to do? What if He has called us to move? Oh, bless your heart. What if He has called us to raise children that have multiple things that are health issues? What if He's called me to actually do what I say I'm going to do? You know, in a time whenever, you know, things like that are hard to find. So, one question I do have is, how do we count it all joy when we encounter various trials? I found 4 key things. It says, by trusting Him through them, through the trials. Psalm 56, 3 and 4 talks about that. By keeping His word, Revelation 3, verses 8 and 10. By keeping our faith alive and hope in Him, Revelation 2:10. And by praying for those who have been critical of us, Job 42:10. So in a day and time where we're supposed to be a servant of God, the same as James, how do we not run and hide? How do we keep our focus?